The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today using Belarc for software license management. My name is Sumin Chen. I'm also joined by Ken Shaw, who will be doing the heavy lifting today. I would suggest that we have a couple of ways of answering questions. We have a couple of brief slides going over architecture, and then Ken will go over much of the software licensing tasks. You can ask questions during the webinar. We'll try to answer them live, and if not, we'll have a Q&A session at the end where we can unmute you and you'll be able to raise your hand and ask questions directly. So let's start the day by first showing a quick question. And if we can answer the poll basically is asking, hopefully everyone can see. Okay, great, people are starting to see the poll. The poll is asking which vendors you're planning to have audits from in the coming 12 months, I believe. Fortunately, can't see the poll question. Great. Ken, can you see the poll?
I do.
You do. Okay. I guess it's just me.
No, not results. I see the bullet list and the question.
Okay. I wonder.
It says organizers and panelists do not vote.
Right. Okay. All right. Terrific. Well, thank you for voting. I don't know if people can see the results, but as you can see, it's about 80% have a Microsoft audit coming up. The next highest one at 21 is Adobe. A little bit behind that is Oracle at 14, and then IBM and SAP are the last two on the list at about 7%. So thank you very much for sharing that, and we can certainly focus our presentation around those results. So let me close the poll, and hopefully everyone is now seeing the introductory slide.
Yes.
Thanks. So today we'll go over a little bit of the architecture of the systems that we're going to be discussing today, and then viewing the software license management process and reports, and then we'll have a brief Q&A session afterwards. So this is the architecture for Bell Manage. If you're familiar with it, just bear with me for just 1 second. But basically, there's a server component, and typically for a large estate, there are clients or agents that are installed. There are also clientless options that you can run on a scan without installing. But if you have a large estate and you wish to have the most automation possible, then installing the agent is really the best way to go. Once the agents are installed, they're installed on laptops and desktops, tablets, servers, and VMs. They are pretty dormant all day. They wake up at 4 in the morning, typically is the default time. They run a scan. Scan typically takes about 15-20 seconds at most, and creates a 40 KB file. That file is then automatically sent back to your Bell Managed server. Again, this is all running internally on your network using HTTP or HTTPS protocols. Your Bell Managed server receives those profiles and then creates entries in your database, and that can be SQL Server or Oracle. And then also the Bell Managed server creates web-based reports that users throughout your organization can log into, and the user access also is supporting two-factor authentication, so PKI cards, if you will. And there is an additional module that we offer, which basically we call the Data Analytics module, which takes the discovered data from Bell Manage and the purchase records that may be either in your Bell Manage database or other repositories. They can be in other SQL databases from SAP or PeopleSoft or other products. They can even be in Excel spreadsheets. And then the Data Analytics module takes that information, automatically has software license reports based on different types of different types of license types, so device-based licensing, user-based licensing, floating cloud, SQL, and there are special reports for SQL Server, Oracle, and IBM. And this is what we will show you today. So there's automated discovery by Bell Manage. This is very much in contrast to some other systems where the normalization is automatically taken care of. The discovery is very complete. There's also ways of seeing which IT hosts that you're not covering, which new VMs you may not be aware of. That's all made known in the Bell Manage system. And it creates a central repository with these host configurations. And this covers both all desktops, laptops, tablets, servers, and VMs. Different OSs that it covers are Windows, Linux, Mac OS X, Solaris, VMware, KVM, and I should add Android, and shortly to be added will be iOS here also. Obviously, we're covering software for Microsoft, Oracle, IBM server software, and these all have specialized licensing rules that we will be discussing. Those are automatically also built into the software reports. Some of the other issues that you may be aware of that are important in software licensing are obviously being able to map the virtual machines, the guest machines, to the hosts, because you're actually, at the end of the day, licensing your physical host. And that's determined by the VMs and what's running in those VMs on those physical hosts. Another area that's very important and very useful, we think, for licensing is actually knowing have the applications actually been used. So certainly in cases like Project and Visio, in Microsoft's case, you really want to know, rather than buying new ones, can you actually harvest or reuse applications out in your estate that have not been used for 6 months or a year, and Bell Manage automatically shows you that. This is also very important in cloud-based licensing, and we will show you some examples of cloud-based licensing where it's very, very helpful to know not just the numbers of devices that that cloud user is authorized on, but actually if that's actually been used, that application has been used or not. And of course, Bell Manage is very accurate in picking up CPUs, cores, hyperthreading, that sort of thing. The purchase records can either be input into Bell Manage database directly, or can be CSV files or Excel spreadsheets. These can also be uploaded to the Bell Manage database. And as we said, it can link to other repositories like PeopleSoft and SAP. Some of our customers are interested in having lists of approved and not approved software. So this system actually automatically allows you to customize a software catalog based on what's found in your estate. And Ken will show you shortly, there are licensing reports for obviously the desktop software and also server products such as SQL Server, Oracle database products, including the options and management packs, which are very important as they can be equally as expensive as the original database. IBM server products and cloud products, we're seeing more and more of our customers going to the cloud, and obviously you want to have a way of managing your Office 365 and Adobe Creative Cloud fees. These are becoming a larger proportion of many IT budgets, and naturally if people are not using those, you really want to discontinue those accounts. CAD software tends to be very interesting because it's expensive, and GIS, the Geographical Information Systems, are interesting software to be licensing, interesting discovery, and rules-based. So I will now turn the presentation over to Ken. Who will go into the actual reporting and software license process that we're recommending. Ken?
Okay, are you seeing my screen? It should be a big blank at the moment, and I'm going to start by opening up the File Open dialog. Are you seeing that now?
Yep, looks great, Ken.
You are, okay. All right, so let's get started talking about the Bell Managed Data Analytics product. The first thing I want to emphasize is that all the data that we're going to be seeing, or I should say all the data that's out there on your computers, is automatically discovered by Bell Manage. Somebody's making some noise on the line there, Simon? Okay. That all the data is automatically discovered by Bell Manage. I mean, all the data that's on your computers. Obviously, the purchase records come from a different source, which is you. You'll notice here in the titles of these reports that they represent a certain structure, and I want to describe that before we jump into the actual reports. As far as license types, that's a very important part of licensing. And for certain products, such as IBM server products, the Oracle database, and SQL Server, they have special licensing rules. And those rules are a bit complicated. They don't just depend on, here's a server, I installed SQL Server, I need a license. Instead, it depends on more things. So therefore, we have specialized reports for those. But the vast majority of software products fall into the category of it's either installed per the computer that it's installed on or by the user that uses it. And those are typically called per device licensing and per computer licensing. And so these top two reports that are called cloud and desktop are the reports that will cover those license types. And we call them cloud and desktop because, of course, they cover the typical desktop software, but also the newer cloud software, which is typically a subscription or kind of a term license, especially that Microsoft with Office 365 and Adobe with its Creative Cloud products are offering. And although those have kind of a different terminology, they're really behave the same way as either a per computer or per user license. So they can be covered in the same reports. So within these categories, we'll be showing you two reports for each of them. And one of them is the instances report, and the other is the purchase versus installed. So the purchase versus installed is the one that reconciles the data that Bell Manage discovers on your computers with your purchase data. And so that tells you whether you're under licensed or over licensed and gives you the dollar implications. On the other hand, that's the final result that you're interested in. But you might want to know about the details, such as, well, what are the actual computers that it's installed on? When was it last used on a particular computer? Or who's using it? Or if a given user is using it, which computers are they using it on? And the instances report lets you see those details. So it's kind of a backup for any kind of deep dive investigation or validation of the data. So let's start with the first report. Okay, I'm going to first go over a little bit the structure of the report. I'm assuming that some of you haven't seen these reports and this kind of screen might look new to you. So the most important part is where I've got the cursor over here in the upper left. We have this table with the green striped rows alternating dark and light. And that's where the actual data is that you're interested in. So let me go over the columns here, and then I'll go over the rest of these boxes that are on the screen. We've got these 5 columns here currently showing, and as you'll see, there are actually more columns available. But this is a summary view of things. And so the company and product columns are obviously describing the software product. So that's the thing that we're interested in, and there's one row for each thing. But actually to describe the product, it's not just the company and product name, but also the license type is critical. These all say device. As you'll see, there are some other types available. So the thing that we're actually talking about is the company and the product of a particular license type. Usually these kinds of products have just one license type, but it's possible that the vendor could offer the same product with different license types, such as per device and per user. And if that were the case, then there could be 2 lines here with the same product, but different license types. And then on the right, we have 2 other columns, and it's pretty obvious what they are. They're counting the number of computers that product's installed on, and the number of users who are using it. But what I want to point out structurally is that these first 3 columns are the thing we're talking about, and the 2 columns on the right are measures of that thing. And as we'll see, there are other possible measures, and you can also refine the description of the product. Okay, so let's look at the other controls. First, down in the lower right, we have this cloud and desktop software fields box. And you'll see on the left there are field names. And these field names correspond to possible columns that can show in the table. So all the columns that are in the table are shown here, but there are more because there are columns that could show up above that are currently hidden. So the main purpose of using the fields is that you can filter the records. For example, let's say you didn't want to look at all the software, but just say Altiris. Now we filtered the number of records down. So that's the basic control that you get out of that. It's being able to focus on some particular software. So the rest of the controls up here, which are currently closed up, and you just open them up by doing a double click, and then the controls are available. These are basically all controls for hiding and showing columns. So down here, you can control which records or software products you're looking at. And up here, you control how much detail you want to see about them. I'll just give you an example of adding a dimension. Let's say you wanted to further break down the computers by the kind of machine. So I click on Machine Class, and now the titles are broken down by whether it's a notebook or a workstation or a server. Okay, so that's basically it for the controls. We'll touch on some of these others, but they're all just variations on being able to control the columns that show. So let's do an actual usage example. And what we'll do is we'll look at Microsoft Visio. Oh, and there's one other important thing I didn't point out, which we'll do in the example here. So currently we're seeing all the software, and that's reflected by this usage saying it's all the software, whether it's used or not used. But a very important capability here is to be able to filter by usage. And what we want to do in this example is say we want to find Microsoft Visio that hasn't been used in quite a while. And we'll characterize quite a while as half a year ago. So I'll pick this 180 days by computer, and I'm doing it by computer because Visio is licensed per device. So we've got that filter, and you might not have noticed, but the table here on the upper left has changed. There are now fewer rows showing, and the numbers up here have dropped because we filtered out a lot of products. We filtered out all the products that had been used more recently than 180 days ago. So I'll filter first by picking company Microsoft. And now you'll see up here, we're just seeing Microsoft products. You see in the company column, it's all Microsoft. And then finally, I'll go to product. And there are my Visio products. So I'll pick all of them. And now we're down to 3 rows, which are just those 3 Visio products. And you can see I have the numbers there. So in the computers column, it's actually dynamic. It reflects the usage so that you know if you're looking up here what you filtered on. And it shows the numbers that have not been used in that time. And as a bonus, it shows how many users are using it on those computers. And you'll see in these lower 2 cases, the number of users is lower, and that implies that some of the users are using that product on multiple computers. Okay, let's do another example. So I'll clear these selections. But I'll leave it on 180 days because that's what I want to do in my next one. I'm going to show you the license types. So I mentioned these different kinds of license types that you can do it per computer, which is also called per device, or by user. You'll notice here there's a category called cloud user. That's essentially a user license, but it goes with software that's actually got a user subscription, such as Office 365. So that just clarifies the kind of software you're talking about, and if you want to focus on cloud software, makes it a little easier to select that rather than having to go to all the actual products by name. And we also cover floating licenses. That's sometimes called a concurrent license. And basically, that's kind of like per device or per computer, but the critical factor is you can install it on many more computers than you have licenses. And over time, many more people can use it than you have licenses. But the restriction is only a limited number can use it at the same time. So it's useful for software that is over a long period of time used by many people, but not by very many at exactly the same time. So I'm going to say I want to see everything that's these non-device type licenses. So I'll select those two. And you'll see with 180 days I've only got a couple of products. I've got a couple from Esri, and that's a geographic information system product. And those are with a floating license. And I've got Office 365. Now actually I have a few more than that, and if I change the usage back to showing all without the restriction, I can also see that I've got some Adobe products. And you'll notice here, of course, in the license type column, it just showed the license type. So you know what that is. Now you might be looking at this and say, oh, I want to know a little more about these. This might be the kind of summary you want to see, but let's say you want to drill down to see some details of these things. One thing we can do is we can see the license keys. And if we go here to this Show Hide Computer columns, we have some categories. And one of them is to show both the usage and the key column. So I click on that, and those columns get added. And you see here toward the right, we've got the serial number and registration columns. For all products but Microsoft, it's just the serial number column that you're interested in. Microsoft has two numbers instead of just a single serial number. So you can see those. Now an interesting thing you'll notice is we are seeing these serial numbers, but over here it says that's on 10 different computers. And that reflects the fact that that same serial number is being used on all those computers. On the other hand, you'll see in this last use time columns over here, we just have these hyphens. And that reflects the fact that these multiple computers have different last use times. So it's impossible to see the actual last use time, given that we're talking about a bunch of computers. So if you did want to see the last use time on those computers, then we could break it down by computer. So we go back to the dimensions and say we want our rows to be broken down by computer. So now the computer column got added over here, and you see the names of the computers. And now you'll see the last use times are filled in, because now for each computer, of course, it's a unique last use time per computer, so we don't have to show the hyphen. And you'll notice the total counts all drop to 1 because, one computer is on one computer, and there's typically one user on one computer. Okay, so that's it for this report. Now we'll switch over to the other cloud and desktop report, which is the purchase and installed report. And that's the one that we'll see reconciles or associates your purchase records with what's been discovered by BellManage out there in your estate. This report's a little simpler, mainly because you cannot drill down to the individual computer, because since it's associating purchase records with the discovered data, the purchase records are not by individual license or by individual computer typically. They typically have light items where you make a purchase and there's a quantity, and the quantity is more than one, 5, 10, 100, 1,000. So it's on that basis that we're doing the reconciliation. So all the extra columns we could show to give you details about the computers are not applicable here. So let's go over these columns here up in the data. Some of it's probably not clear, and probably the most cryptic thing to you is over on the far right where it says PI status. That's actually very important for the license manager to understand, and it gives them control or knowledge about what's going on. What the PI stands for is purchased, installed. And if we go down here where we can select the PI status, you'll see there are 3 showing here, PI, I, and P. So what PI means is that that software product row, for example, active identity, active client, that's both been discovered by BellManage and you've entered it into your purchase records. And this report has been able to associate the two. So that's really your goal in this report, is that all the software you're interested in should have a PI status, and then you'll be able to see the reconciliation. On the other hand, that might not happen. So the I means that the software is installed only. So if I click that, you'll notice the display popped and it got shorter. And that's because all the purchase information disappeared. There's no dollar figures, no quantity purchased. And that's because if we're looking at only what's been installed, I mean things that are installed but don't match up with anything in the purchase records, then of course there's no purchase record information to show. So we simplify the display and make it clear that we're looking at software that's not matching up with anything in the purchase records. Now this is normal because there'll probably be many software titles that you won't bother to try and track. You know, your top 20 or 50 software titles are going to be 95 or 99% of your spend, and all the other legions of small obscure things are not going to be important. So you probably won't ever enter purchase records for them. So you'll have this situation. On the other hand, if we look at the P only, that's something you don't expect, because you figure if you're entering something in the purchase records, it's something your company bought, it's been installed. So why does this happen? Because the names don't match up. You know, the name that's been installed could be different from the purchase name. And you didn't know that at the beginning, but now that you see there are purchased only things, you realize there's a name problem. And there are several ways in the data analytics product to reconcile the names. The obvious thing is just make them identical. But if for some reason you can't do that, there are other ways to define an association. And when you've done that, that product will move out of the P category for one name and the I category for another, and they'll jump into the PI category. So this is really valuable because this way you won't miss things. That is, you might enter your purchase records, think you're all done. If you weren't shown this, something might be missing, but you wouldn't know it, at least, you know, not easily. So it's a real usability help. So let's go back to look at some interesting data. So I'll set the status back to the PI so that we're looking at the kind of stuff that's working properly. So let's just go over the columns. So got the company, product, and license type, just like in the instances. It's the exact same meaning. The rights here are what you purchased. I mean the right that you've purchased. And the most important things are L and M, which stand for license and management. But here we've actually got an S, and that stands for a subscription, you know, the user subscription, which is typically what the vendor calls the cloud user or cloud device kind of right. Then we have the numbers. So purchased, that's how many units you purchased in your purchase records. And then computers and users are the installation. So computers is how many computers it's been installed on, and users is how many users are using it. And then finally, the analysis, which is whether you're under-licensed or over-licensed. And then, given the cost that you entered in the purchase records, not only how much you paid, but how much you underpaid or overpaid, given whether you're under-licensed or over-licensed. Obviously, if you've paid for something, this potential cost savings is perhaps not something you can go back and do something about. But if it's something that renews, such as a cloud user subscription license or maintenance, then obviously the potential cost savings will be available to you, because you could decide to reduce the number of licenses if you're over-licensed. Okay, let's just do an example here. We'll do the same thing we did in the earlier report. We'll take a look at Visio here. So I'll go to Company, and I'll pick Microsoft. And I'll go to Product, and I'll select the Visio Reports again, or the Visio Products. And you see we're down to 3 rows. And in this case, it looks like with the Visio, we currently just have the software assurance recorded. And for the premium, we didn't even bother to put a rights. You don't have to specify rights. It defaults to assuming that that means a perpetual license. And so now you have some actual results showing you where you're under licensed and over licensed and what the cost implications are. Okay, so what we'll do now is move on to the other reports, and we'll see they're similar but different, and the differences you'll see are because of the licensing models of these specialized products. So we'll start with Microsoft SQL Server. So I'll go with the instances. Now this looks superficially similar to the other instances. Not that you can, I'm sorry, it's not superficially resembling it, because this also doesn't have nearly as many controls. It does have some show hide column controls, and we'll see those. But because the report itself is already specialized for the license model, some of the details you might want to see in the other case, you don't need to have controls to see here. They're just built in. Okay, let's start by going over the columns of the table here. So I guess the first things are we have the SQL Server Edition. By the way, there's kind of a built-in help here. So if you want to know what this title SQL Server Edition means, you put the mouse over it, and this pop-up description appears. So it's a little annoying in the demo because every time I want to point at the title, this yellow box obscures it, but it's really convenient when you're a user of the product to learn what the meaning of it is. So the SQL Server Edition and version, that's your basic product identifier. And of course, SQL Server has several editions and has had different versions over the years. And then we have the license type, just as we did in the cloud and desktop report. But the license types are different here. With SQL Server, there are 3 ways you can license it, or I mean there are 3 ways over the lifetime of SQL Server. For a given edition and version, not all license types are available. But the 3 that are or have been available over the lifetime of SQL Server are core licensing, that's the core, server licensing, and processor-based licensing, which we call PROC, which I don't see any of on the screen right now. So those 3 things are your identifier, because for example with standard, which we see as core here, you could also do that per server, and it's your choice for whether to do that, and you apply different licensing rules depending on which license type you've picked. Okay, now an essential thing to keep in mind with SQL Server licensing, this is actually I think true with Oracle and pretty much true with IBM, what you're licensing is a physical server. Now, if you're running the software on the physical server and there are no virtual machines, that's a no-brainer. Obviously, you're licensing the physical server. On the other hand, if the physical server is not running the software directly, but it's hosting virtual machines, 1 or more, and they're running the software, might not be clear until you understand the rules. And the rules are you're licensing the physical server that's hosting the virtual machines. You are not licensing the virtual machines. However, to count how many licenses you need for the physical server, you have to know how many virtual machines there are and what the characteristics are of those virtual machines. Or at least in some of the choices you have, you need to do that. Sometimes you have to do that, sometimes it's an option, and that's part of the complexity. Anyhow, so the server that we're talking about applying licenses to is named here in the server column, and that's the name of the computer. So just to jump over here to a final result where we have the licenses required, which is the end result, you'll notice there's a number only in certain rows. And if you look over here to the machine type column where there's a P or a V, well, P means physical server and V means virtual machine. And you'll see there are licenses required only in the P rows. And that goes back to what I said, that you're actually only licensing the physical servers. But we're showing the virtual machines here because they contribute to computing the number of licenses required. This is host column is redundant but a convenience. You'll notice it shows up here in the top part and then disappears farther down. Where it's showing is it's showing the physical servers that are hosting virtual machines running SQL Server. So any physical server that's a host of virtual machines running SQL Server is called a host. And so those are flagged here for easy viewing. And down here where there are more physical machines toward the bottom, they're not hosts because, as we'll see, they are running SQL Server directly without virtual machines. So because of these differences, we want to categorize those explicitly. So over here on the left, we have these two columns, VM set name and VM set type. And the VM set type is one of several possible values. V on P means virtual on physical. So it means you actually have a set that is one or more virtual machines associated with the physical host. And so what we're actually seeing as far as the rows here, where there are one or more V's under a P, that's the whole set. So it's been sorted so they're grouped together. So you can see the physical host, and then right below it you can see its virtual machines. We get a little farther down, and we just have P's. So we call these sets, but these are actually just physical servers that don't have any virtual machines, and they're running SQL Server directly. And there's one more category, and if we get far enough down, we should run into it. Yeah, called OV. And you'll notice there are no licenses required anywhere here. And you'll notice all the machine types are virtuals. These are virtual machines that Bell Manage has not been able to associate with a physical host. And that happens when you inventory the virtual machines with Bell Manage, but you don't inventory the physical host with Bell Manage. So Bell Manage has the inventories of the virtuals, but not of the physical host. And if it does not have the inventory of the physical host, then it can't put the two together. So this is a warning that you have SQL Server installed on a bunch of virtual machines, but you haven't fully inventoried your computer server estate yet in order to properly do your SQL Server licensing. So in a situation like this, you would need to remedy it by finding out, talk to your IT department and say, hey, there are a bunch of virtual machines out there, but you haven't done a complete Bell Manage inventory. Let's get the rest of those inventoried. And after you did that, you'd be able to complete your SQL Server licensing. So there are two of these because we have the type that I just talked about, and then we name each set so we can see what goes together. So you see the first two rows have the same set name, and that's a P with a single V on it. We go farther down here where it says desk 2309Q2, and I'm on the physical host row right here, and then below it there are 4 virtual machines. So we see clearly they all go together because of the name. And so when we do the license computation, with this, for example, desk 2309Q2, that's the universe of data that we'll be gathering together in order to finally come up with this number here where it says 16 licenses are required. Okay, so how did this licenses required get computed? Well, it takes some data into account. First, what I've just been talking about, which is this physical host and the virtuals. But with SQL Server, you have to look at the physical characteristics, or potentially you do. Certainly here it says that we're looking at per core licensing, which means we have to know the number of cores. And in the case of standard, we have to know that on the virtuals that are running standard. And if it's running directly on the physical, we have to know that too. So let's look at that data. So I'll go to the show hide columns. And first I'll say, let's see where SQL Server is actually installed. Let me bring that back up to the top. Okay, so I think I just made a mistaken selection. Let me bring that back again. Okay, so the columns that have been added are the ones to the right of his host, and that starts with the actual edition and the actual version. So you remember over here we have SQL Server edition and version. What we see now is that the actual edition and version, that means what's actually installed on that computer, whereas the plain old SQL Server edition and SQL Server version columns over here on the left, those are the ones being licensed. And you know that you don't have to license exactly what's installed. One reason is downgrade rights, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And the other is there might not actually be one. And you'll see with this very first row, on that physical host, there is no SQL server. But over here, we say we have to license that because that's what's on the virtual machine that it hosts. So by opening it up and seeing what's actually installed, we see the structure that this physical host isn't running SQL Server, but is liable for SQL Server licenses because it's hosting a virtual machine running it. And this way we see that the fact that it has to be licensed for Enterprise Core comes because, in fact, that's literally what's on the virtual machine. Now that in turn could be different on the virtual machine if the virtual machine were using downgrade rights and using Enterprise Core 2012 for an earlier edition, or earlier, I should say less powerful edition, or an earlier version of SQL Server. So I'm going to hide those and show some more columns. You can show all the columns at once, but I'm hiding them because they'd go totally off the screen otherwise, which is one reason we have a hide show, because it's just so many columns and you don't always want to be seeing them. Okay, so what's new here?
We're going to have to move along. We're going to run out of time.
Okay. So what we're seeing here on the left is the actual data discovered by Bell Manage that goes into this, which is the number of cores. And also if it were the number of processors or the number of CPUs that the licensing rules took into effect, they're all here. So that's the base data, the facts. And then we have these cryptically named columns, proclick and corelick and so on. Those represent intermediate computations. So that's where the licensing rules are actually being used by the report to compute numbers. And you'll notice there are a lot of blanks. And the reason there are blanks is that some of these intermediate computations might be inapplicable. For example, with Enterprise Core 2012, there is no per processor or per server licensing available. So they're blank. It's only the core licensing that's computed. Anyhow, that's where this license is required of 4 comes from. This basic data, do these intermediate calculations, and then a final calculation out of that. On downgrade rights, I'll just show you an example. What I want to do is I've actually used downgrade rights on standard 2012 in here. So what I'll do is select that. So here's my fields box, the thing I mentioned that lets you filter out the number of rows. And I'll say let's go to standard. And you'll see everything is standard 2012. But if I go back to the instance columns, you'll see there are lots of different editions and versions. And the fact is, behind the scenes, through a configuration capability in the report, I said all of these are receiving downgrade rights from standard 2012. By the way, you'll see Express here. Of course, you wouldn't do that in practice because Express is free, but that's what I did in my demo system. Okay. So let's go on to the purchase versus installed report. And obviously, I'll go through the rest of the reports in much less detail. But as you'll see, they're all pretty similar to this. They just differ in the details of the licensing rules. So this is the SQL Server purchase versus installed. We have SKU columns here because that can be of interest for SQL Server because it's from Microsoft and they have SKUs. As far as identifying the product, we have both the purchase name and the installed name. So rather than just showing one name for both, we actually have the 2 different names. And that's because they need to be a little bit different in some cases. I won't go into the details of that, but that's how we have it broken out. So the purchase is what you have in your purchase records, and the installed is what Bell Manage just discovered. You'll notice there are some blanks here, and there's a star. That reflects the meaning of the PI status. So if something is purchased is installed, then the purchase data is filled in, the installed data is filled in. On the other hand, if it's purchased only, we see the name in the purchase column, but the installed data is blank. And then finally, this star, you'll notice that there's no version there. I mean, we just have a star. So if you have LSA rights, particularly if you have software assurance, the SA part, that means that your edition is valid for all versions. And so if you actually have multiple versions installed, then we can't show them all in one row. So we put a star, and that means that there were multiple installed versions that this license represented. And down here in this blue table, we give the details so you can here outside of matching up with the dollar figures, you can see the breakdown of what's actually installed. But otherwise, it's similar to the other purchase installed. You've got the total number installed here, and then the number purchased. And then we have a license is required because, you know, we don't just look at servers installed on, but the actual difference has to be between what's purchased and what's required. And as I went through, what's required is the result of a complex calculation. And then we get the final results over here where we show the cost figures, including the potential cost savings. Okay, so that's it for SQL Server. I'll quickly show you Oracle and IBM. So here's the Oracle instances report, and this is very similar to the SQL Server one. We've got the VM sets, because the same thing applies to Oracle. That is, you can run on virtual machines, but you're licensing the physical, so you have to know which virtuals are on which physical. We've got the product identifier. It's different here in that there's a product column. It's not just edition and version, and that's because with the Oracle database there are options and packs, and they offer important capabilities, and they cost a significant amount of money. So that extra column is there. Otherwise, this stuff is the same. You know, got the machine type, and you can see the host, so whether it's a VMP set or not, that's clearly shown, and how many licenses are required. And the licenses required is according to the license type. Processor means you're doing it by the physical machine. The alternative is by named user. I don't have an example of anything being done by named user here. And as in the other one.
Ken, I just want to reiterate that it's really important everyone realize that all the data that they're seeing on the instances report is automatically collected by Bell Manage. So this is not manually input. This is all the Oracle database, and options and management packs are automatically discovered along with the versions, and everything on this report you're seeing is actually automatically discovered, including the physical hosts and the virtual machines that are part of that physical machine. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yeah, good. So just to show you, if I click on Show Installation Columns, it gets a lot wider. We can see the actual edition and version, the installation name, and if we instead show the license computation columns, again, we see the hardware factors that have been discovered by Bell Manage, the number of CPUs and cores, and then we have some of the intermediate calculations, which are a little simpler in the case of Oracle, so there aren't so many, mainly because with Oracle, they let you run on virtual machines, but all your factors to take into account for the number of licenses you need are all based on the physical machine, not on the virtual. So there's not as much to show here. So that was the Oracle instances and the Oracle purchase versus installed. Again, very similar to SQL Server. The important difference is there's also a product name. So you see here, for example, there's the database, which is the main thing, and here are a couple of options, one called label security and one called partitioning. And they're broken out so that you know that they're broken out, and they're also separate purchases with, as you see over here, separate numbers for the cost per license. And the usual thing as far as the status, that the PI means it's purchased and installed, it's been reconciled, so you can see the purchase name associated with the installed names. On the other hand, here, kind of in the middle, there are a couple of P rows only. So we see the purchase name, but it hasn't matched up with anything. So that's probably something you need to fix up. And then you also have a bunch of installed only things. So we see the installed product, but there's no purchase name. Could just be that you need to enter the purchase, or it could be that somebody installed something that you never purchased and you've actually got a purchase to make. And again, the rights, M means maintenance, L means licensing. And I guess I didn't point out that as far as the purchase records go, we do support both tracking both licenses, perpetual licenses and term licenses, and maintenance on them. And if your maintenance goes year by year, then you can enter your maintenance year by year in the purchase records. You can have your current data and your old data. And there's a place in another report to report on your historical maintenance records if that's of interest. Okay, and finally we'll get to the two IBM reports. So we have the IBM instances. And the instance columns are showing already. That's why we have the actual edition and version and so on. The difference here, so let me back up. So we've got the virtual machine columns because with IBM, virtual and physical matter just as they do with SQL Server and Oracle. We've got the three columns, product, edition, and version. In this case, it's not like SQL Server where we're saying there are options to the database. As far as the IBM licensing goes, what we support here is what's called PVU licensing, Processor Value Unit, and that's the most common license model offered by IBM. It's something like 80% of their products, or at least 80% of the dollar value of products they sell. And Processor Value Unit means they're taking the number of cores and power of the server into account. So it's pretty much the same as cores, but it's slightly different than the way Oracle and SQL Server do it. So we're not even showing the license type column here because with this report, it's always the PVU license type. So the reason we can support multiple products here is it's all the products that follow the PVU model. They all have the same licensing rules. So you see here in the product column, we're seeing DB2 and WebSphere, and that's currently being filtered by this V on P. Let's get rid of that and see we have some more products being covered here. And down here it shows that the license type is PVU. We're just not bothering to show it up here on top. But otherwise it's pretty much the same. The virtual machine dependency mapping, if it exists, or if it's a plain physical machine, is indicated over here by the set type, product description, and the server that's being physically licensed. So I'll hide those instance columns, and again we can see the license computations. And the PVUs basically take the CPUs and cores into account. And then there's some intermediate calculations here. Those of you who know IBM know that you can either do what's called full capacity licensing or subcapacity, or you have the ability to do subcapacity if you meet certain requirements. Anyhow, we're calculating both options here, and we're currently just showing the best of the choice. So it assumes you have subcapacity rights available, and we're going to show you what the final number will be, assuming you have that. If you don't, well, then you have to just use the full number, even though it might be more than the subcapacity number. The subcapacity number here you see is blank in all these rows, and I believe that's because those are just physical machines without virtuals. Okay, and finally we'll show the IBM purchase versus installed report. So as with the other specialized ones, SQL Server and Oracle, we've got the purchase product versus the installed product. And the PI status is way over here on the right. So as with the others, everything's filled in when it's P and I, but if it's purchased only, then we only see the purchase product. And similarly, if it's installed only, we're seeing only the installed product. And so we do the usual thing, how many PVUs you've purchased, how many are required, and this required is the result of applying the licensing rules, which we briefly saw in the previous report. And then you get your dollar figures as far as the total license cost and whether you're how much you're over or under licensed. And as I mentioned, this blue table down here, when you have this star up here under the installed version, that means you have something you purchased that you're permitted to apply to different versions, and therefore up here we just have that in one row. because we're focused on the purchase product. But down here, if you want to know the details of how that breaks out by versions, you can do that. 5 minutes left, Sumit.
Great.
I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Ken, and thanks everyone for joining us. We have a few minutes for questions. If you would like to, in the control box, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you, or we can take questions from the question box. We've been answering a couple as we have been going along. But if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, please do ask questions. We're happy either to explain anything that wasn't clear or just review something that you want to see a second time.
Right, so we have Robert Linville. Hold on, Robert, let me unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, so you said that you imported from Excel and from some software. Do you also have the ability to import from I think it's called the CPS that you get from Microsoft licensing when you get your new renewals?
Yes, exactly. So if that's in a CSV or Excel spreadsheet format, then you can upload that to the BellManage database.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, if there were a little more time, I could show that to you. We could show that to you, but that's basically how that would work. So in CSV or Excel format, you can upload that. Any other questions? Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us. Please be on the alert. We'll have other topics coming up in the near future, and thank you all. Anyone with comments, please feel free to email us or call us directly. Probably the best email is info@belarc.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.